And the U.S. President Barack Obama is set to give his goodbye speech to the nation at McCormick Place at 8 p.m. local time in his hometown, Chicago. This farewell speech is marking the end of his successful 8 years of presidency. Now we have live by phone via VOA Patsy Widakuswara from Chicago. Good evening, Patsy. What is expected from Obama in his speech?
Well, we're about 10 minutes away from his speech, and right now I'm at the McCormick Place Convention Center where the speech is going to be held, and everybody's excited and everybody's ready to watch this historic speech, the end or the last speech that he will be presenting as President of the United States. And based on the embargoed speech that has been released, we know that it's going to be a forward-looking speech. So it's going to cap all his successes, all his achievements in the past 8 years, but it's not going to dwell on that so much. Rather, it would more look ahead as to what the American people is going to be looking at in the next 4 years or so. And one of the things that I think we can also expect from this speech is that it will also be an admonition towards Donald Trump. You know, I doubt that President Obama will name President Trump by name. That's just not his style. But I'm sure that there will be parts of his speech that will underline issues such as diversity and inclusivity, the values of America as a democracy, as a nation of immigrants, some sort of offering of hope and healing to the American people that has gone through a very, very bitter and a very, very divisive election cycle. So there's going to be some of that. There's some hope, also some admonition, and some reassurance that the America that President Obama believes in and has built for the past 8 years is going to be a legacy that continues to move forward. Even though, things will change, because obviously these two men have very different ideological leanings, very different temperament as well, and many of Obama's achievements has already been threatened to be reversed by the Trump administration. But we'll see what happens in about 15 minutes, and I can come back to you again on after this speech as well.
Okay. And again, speaking of legacies, this is Obama's legacies are under threat from the incoming Trump administration. Can you please elaborate on that one?
Yeah, so for example, like his signature legislative achievement, which is Obamacare, this is allowing more than 20 million Americans access to health care. The U.S. is the only country, the only industrialized country in this world that does not have access to universal health care. And Obamacare is his signature legacy, signature piece of legislation, but of course the Republicans in Congress, who is now a supermajority in both the House and the Senate, as well as Donald Trump, has promised to threaten or to repeal Obamacare. That's a very important piece of domestic legislation. Internationally, there are things like, for example, the TPP, the international trade agreement between Asia-Pacific countries. Indonesia has indicated that we are interested as well. Donald Trump has said that he is going to repeal the TPP on day one. And there's also the Paris Agreement for climate change. President Obama has worked really hard to garner the support of many world leaders to sign the Paris Agreement. Donald Trump has appointed a climate change skeptic to head the Environmental Protection Agency, as well as threatened to pull the U.S. out of the Paris Agreement. So it's extremely different, extremely opposite spectrum of political ideologies as well as policies ahead. And so many of his achievements are under threat. And so this is something that President Obama and, of course, the Democratic Party is very concerned about. And that's partly part of his speech goal tonight, is to cement his legacy, even though it is under threat with the incoming administration.
And lastly, would this have any effect on the Indonesian-U.S. relations with this new U.S. leadership?
Well, when I spoke last to Indonesian dignitaries, including Vice President Yusuf Kala, they're saying, no matter who's in the White House, Indonesia and the U.S. has a good relationship and will continue to remain partners and friends in many sectors, economy, counterterrorism, and so forth. However, the Vice President Yusuf Kala also expressed his concern about some of the rhetoric, some of the anti-Muslim sentiments that Donald Trump, President-elect, has so casually thrown about during his campaign. Having said that, even though there's going to be a change in dynamics in terms of how President Obama has a very personal connection to Indonesia, he grew up, he spent some of his childhood years in Indonesia. But don't forget that Donald Trump also has ties to Indonesia, which is his business ties. Donald Trump has investments in West Java as well as Bali, and he also has appointed Carl Icahn recently. He as somebody who will supervise financial regulations reform in the U.S. And Carl Icahn is one of the biggest shareholders in Freeport-McMoRan that is, of course, one of the biggest taxpayers in Indonesia. So a lot of business interests, a lot of business connections, and these are some of the things that we have to pay attention to going ahead in the future because, all these business interests, business assets between Trump, the businessman, Trump organization, may present a conflict of interest for Trump, the president, when dealing with foreign countries, including Indonesia.
All right, thank you very much, Patsy. That was Voice of America's Patsy Widakuswara reporting live from Chicago.